Eric Forrester's dream of a grand Italian sojourn to celebrate renewed family unity has curdled into a nightmare as the stress of loyalty and betrayal bears down on his brittle health like a vice, and by the time he reaches the rolling hills of Tuscany, every polite smile and pastoral vista only underscores the turmoil that has torn through his family back home. In Rome's stifling summer heat, he delivers a shaky keynote to an assembly of Forrester's European partners, his voice quavering on the podium as he utters the words that once rolled off his tongue with unshakable confidence. The words designed to rally investors and design aficionados around the storied legacy of Forrester Creations. But halfway through his speech, his hand flutters to his chest, his eyes glaze over, and he forces himself through the final lines with Herculean effort before collapsing into the arms of his daughter-in-law, Hope, whose white-knuckled grip on his elbow belies the panic in her eyes. Ridge watches from the front row, torn between rage at the crisis that has splintered his family, Taylor in Florence, Brooke in Venice, each nursing wounds of old betrayals and new resentments, and profound fear for the patriarch who has held them all together for decades. And as Eric is whisked away on a stretcher to a private clinic, murmurs ripple through the gathering that the founder of fashion itself may be succumbing not to the physical strains of age, but to the stress inflicted by his own children's ambitions. Back in Los Angeles, the boardroom at Forrester Creations has become an arena of uneasy alliances and whispered desperation. Thomas, once the black sheep, and RJ, the heir apparent whose every move is dissected by the press, find themselves drafted into an unlikely leadership duo to steady the ship in Eric's absence, their combined title reading like a legal contract, interim co-CEOs. And while they both bristle at the forced partnership, they recognize that without decisive action, Forrester's storied reputation could unravel faster than any sketch gone wrong on the drawing board. Thomas, fueled by decades of frustrated ambition and wounded pride, pushes for urgent creative boldness, avant-garde lines, daring runway stunts, a capsule collection inspired by the drama of Eric's health scare, while RJ, ever the cautious strategist, insists on tightening the purse strings, controlling overhead, and consolidating the brand's core markets before chasing any new frontiers. Their late-night sessions in the glass-walled war room become battlegrounds of clashing visions, each man trading jabs as the company's future teeters on a razor's edge, and yet in the crucible of crisis, they find a grudging respect for one another's strengths, knitting together a plan that marries Thomas's flair for fearless innovation with RJ's shrewd financial oversight, laying the groundwork for a relaunch that could either save or sink the brand, depending on the fickle winds of fashion and fortune. Amid this chaos, Zoe Buckingham and Paris Buckingham, nieces of Grace and distant scions of the Buckingham fortune, scent an opportunity as keenly as bloodhounds tracking a wounded deer. With Eric incapacitated and the company's coffers strained by the cost of maintaining European offices and the mercenary legal fees incurred from recent family litigation, Forrester Creations stands perilously close to seeking outside investment. And Zoe and Paris each approach the board with a proposal wrapped in honeyed promises of salvation, suggesting that they purchase a majority stake in the brand, injecting fresh capital to fund the relaunch, secure raw materials, and underwrite Thomas and RJ's ambitious collection rollout. But in truth, their elegant pitch conceals a far more aggressive agenda: control the brand's intellectual property, leverage the Buckingham network to reroute profits through offshore holding companies they secretly dominate, and gradually dilute the Forrester family's influence until the name remains only on labels while the real power lies in their hands. In a closed-door meeting, Zoe presents glossy brochures picturing runway shows in Milan and Paris, ironic foreshadowing of her own surname, while Paris Buckingham cites market data predicting a 20% uptick in luxury consumption if new management can quell the narrative of internal turmoil. And as they speak, their smiles never falter, but their eyes glitter with a calculating gleam that sends a chill through RJ, who remembers too well the fate of Rupert's legacy when the elder Buckinghams engineered his ouster. Thomas, torn between his own debt of gratitude to the Buckinghams, who helped finance his early forays into experimental design, and his fierce loyalty to the Forrester name, demands guarantees that the family's creative autonomy remains inviolate. Zoe disarms him with a laugh that sounds like clinking champagne glasses, assuring him that only their shared vision of brilliance matters, that contracts can be crafted to protect artistic direction, and that any Forrester clause will ensure Eric's line endures in perpetuity. But RJ sees the fine print hidden in the appendices, default triggers that allow the Buckingham duo to seize voting rights the moment Forrester's quarterly earnings slip below projections, a scenario RJ knows is all too plausible under current market volatility. Meanwhile, Eric fights to reclaim his health in a Tuscan clinic, the scent of cypress and lavender a distant comfort compared to the stifling pressure of family expectations. He drifts in and out of fevered dreams where he is back at the helm of his company, applauded by adoring crowds and embraced by grateful children, only to awaken to the cold reality of 4 drips and nurses charting his vitals, the lines on his face deeper than any London fog. His calls go unreturned as he reaches for Ridge's name on his phone, and Ridge, grappling with Brooke's pain over his family's fragmentation, has left Italy for urgent board meetings, leaving Eric to grapple with his solitude and the worry that he may have built an empire too heavy for anyone to carry in his stead. As word of Zoe and Paris's offer leaks to the rumor mill, Grace Buckingham, whose own salvation arc with Liam Spencer has made her a loved public figure once more, finds herself at a crossroads. Should she endorse her niece's bid, cementing the Buckingham-Forrester alliance and potentially rescuing the company, or should she side with her old friend Steffi Finnegan, who warns that such a takeover would besmirch the very heritage Eric devoted his life to creating? Grace's silence in response to press questioning about her position speaks volumes. She is torn between familial loyalty to her blood and heartfelt loyalty to a man who once trusted her with his son's life, the weight of that debt heavier than any financial ledger. In Los Angeles, news outlets buzz with speculation, social media abounds with hashtags like #ForresterFate and #BuckinghamTakeover, and soap opera aficionados dissect every pixel of leaked boardroom photos, while backstage at fashion workshops, sewers and pattern makers hold their breath, knowing that every seam they stitch could become a bullet point in the next board meeting's power struggle. As Thomas and RJ finalize their emergency strategy, leaning into a preemptive digital fashion show streamed live from Florence in solidarity with Eric, paired with a limited edition Forrester Legacy capsule that will launch from Milan to coincide with Zoe and Paris's vote on a takeover bid. They brace for a climactic showdown at the next shareholders' meeting, where the fate of the company, the Forrester name, and Eric's legacy will be decided not by the strokes of a pencil on design sketches, but by the sharpness of legal arguments and the weight of shareholder ballots. And somewhere between the olive groves of Tuscany and the neon glow of Rodeo Drive, Eric Forrester, frail but unbowed, prepares to cast his own vote. On his future, on his family, and on the empire he loves more than life itself, knowing that whichever side prevails will not merely chart the course of a fashion dynasty, but will redefine the meaning of loyalty, power, and the true cost of ambition in a world where every stitch tells a story of love, betrayal, and extraordinary intrigue. The sun had scarcely risen over the Tuscan hills when the unthinkable happened. Eric Forrester, patriarch of the world's most celebrated fashion dynasty, drew a final, shuddering breath in the sterile hush of the private clinic and slipped away, leaving behind a silence so profound that even the cypress trees seemed to bow their branches in mourning. Donna, who had spent the night pacing the marble floors of the villa's guest wing, chasing rumors and chasing hope, arrived at the clinic door just as the attending nurse, face pale and eyes downcast, stepped out into the hallway. her uniform creased like a funeral shroud. Donna's heart seized, her knees buckled, and she clutched the edge of the nurse's station as the last strands of her composure unraveled. "Is he?" she whispered, voice cracking on the single word. The nurse's nod fell like a guillotine. In that instant, Donna's world shattered. The man who had been her partner in love, business, and life for decades, whose laughter had filled their halls and whose vision had shaped industries, was gone. She stumbled forward, arms outstretched as though she could grasp him from the void, and then everything went black. When she awoke, hours later, it was to the relentless drip of N4, the antiseptic tang of medicine in her nostrils, and the soft murmur of Steffi Finnegan's voice at her bedside, pleading for her to eat, to breathe, to accept that Eric was truly gone. But Donna's ears heard nothing beyond the echo of one irrevocable truth. Her husband, her confidant, her greatest love, was no more. In the days that followed, Donna existed in a haze of funerary black and whispered condolences, moving through the villa's empty corridors like a ghost tethered to grief. She refused the eulogies, the televised tributes, the outpouring of floral arrangements that encroached upon every surface she dared to approach. Each bloom was a cruel reminder that life went on in a riot of color while her own world had drained to ash. Brooke Logan, Eric Forrester, Taylor Hayes, Thomas, R.J. Even Zoe and Paris Buckingham hovered like reluctant shadows at Donna's side, but their words rebounded off the cavernous emptiness in her heart. The funeral itself was a spectacle worthy of a king of fashion. The great cathedral chapel hung with black velvet banners bearing the Forrester crest, silver candelabras flickering beneath towering stained-glass windows that cast kaleidoscopic sorrow across the marble floor. Friends and rivals alike pressed into the pews. Bill Spencer in solemn gravitas, Hope and Liam Spencer with Beth and Kelly clinging to their hands, the entire Buckingham clan in austere splendor, each person a living testament to the breadth of Eric's influence. Yet as the choir's somber refrains filled the air, Donna sat alone, clutching Eric's favorite silk scarf, its pattern of peacocks a mocking symbol of the life they had built together. When Ridge delivered his eulogy, his voice cracking as he recounted childhood summers spent at Forrester's Connecticut estate and his father's unbreakable faith in family, Donna felt an icy wind tear through her chest. Taylor's trembling tribute spoke of Eric's kindness, his patience in rebuilding her shattered spirit after years of heartache. Thomas and R.J. stood united at the altar, the weight of interim leadership pressing on them even as they mourned the man who had entrusted them with his legacy. But no words reached Donna's ears. She saw only the empty space beside her where Eric should have been, the vacant chair that once bore his tailored suits and easy grin. In the flicker of candlelight, she glimpsed the life that would never be. Anniversaries uncelebrated, late-night dinners unshared, the gentle clasp of his hand in hers absent from her trembling fingers. As the congregation filed past the casket, each mourner casting one last longing glance, it was Brooke who knelt before Donna, wrapping her arms around her in a fierce embrace that spoke of sisterhood more profound than any rivalry. Donna felt the long-buried ache of friendship rekindle in that moment, a fragile ember against the gale of grief, and she clung to Brooke as though by sheer force of will she could draw sustenance from her. Yet even Brooke's presence could not stem the tide of sorrow. When the final notes of the organ died away and the clergy intoned a benediction for Eric's soul, Donna rose unsteadily and preceded the funeral procession into the sun-drenched courtyard, where a sea of mourners awaited the committal. The ancient olive tree beneath which Eric's casket would rest bore silent witness as the gravediggers lowered him into the earth, and when the first handful of soil landed on the polished wood, Donna felt the ground give way beneath her soul. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered, lips parted in a silent prayer, tears streaming down her cheeks as though her very blood were weeping at this betrayal of mortality. In the days that followed the funeral, The battle for Forrester creations that had already begun in Eric's absence accelerated with ruthless momentum. Thomas and RJ convened emergency board meetings in the villa's drawing room, each iteration of minutes marked by the bruised reality that Eric's guiding hand could no longer smooth their conflicts. Zoe and Paris Buckingham, emboldened by the patriarch's death, redoubled their efforts to finalize the takeover, their voices honeyed, but their intentions as sharp as daggers as they pressed their proposals on a grieving Donna, now the majority shareholder by virtue of inheritance, to vote her shares in favor of the Buckingham alliance. Thomas, haunted by memories of his father's unwavering commitment to family control, implored Donna to remember Eric's dying wish to keep the company in family hands, recounting private conversations in which Eric had vowed that Forrester would never fall to outside investors. RJ, torn between his loyalty to the name and his instinct to protect the company from insolvency, argued for compromise. A limited partnership with Buckingham Capital in exchange for shares that would revert to the family upon certain performance metrics. But Donna, her grief still raw as a wound, could barely summon the clarity to parse balance sheets, much less negotiate high-stakes mergers. She spent hours in the villa's sunroom, gazing out at the gardens Eric had designed with his own hands, clutching the silk scarf and a single handful of dirt from his grave, uncertain whether her next act could ever honor his legacy or would doom it entirely. In the stillness of those afternoons, the sound of distant voices negotiating her father-in-law's fate felt like a betrayal, and she wept for the naive hope that love and loyalty would outlast ambition and greed. Steffi and Hope, their own losses tempered by the certainty that their marriages would endure, rallied around Donna, offering companionship, counsel, and most of all, the steadfast reminder that blood ties cannot be severed by corporate contracts. Hope brought Beth and Kelly to sit by Donna's side, their small hands slipping into hers, their presence a balm to a mother's broken heart. Steffi drafted letters to the board, pressing the case for family unity and suggesting a temporary moratorium on any share transfers until a formal memorial fund could be established in Eric's name. Brooke, ever the fierce ally, confronted Zoe and Paris in the gallery overlooking the boardroom, her voice low and resolute as she declared that any move to usurp the Forrester name would be met with the full force of the family's legal might. Yet as the clock ticked nearer to the crucial shareholders' vote, whispers spread through the industry that board members, pressured by Buckingham's deep pockets and lured by promises of expansion into untapped markets, had begun to waver. At night, Donna awoke haunted by nightmares of Eric's voice, calling to her from a void, urging her to fight for the future he had dreamed of. She rose, drawn to his study, where the scent of his cologne still lingered on the leather-bound volumes and the walnut desk he had used for 50 years. There, under the dim glow of the desk lamp, she drafted her own letter to the board, a passionate, grieving testament to Eric's credo, that family is the heart of every design, that love and creativity flourish best under the shelter of trust, and that no amount of external capital could replace the soul he had poured into the brand. She poured every fragment of memory, his guidance as she learned to navigate high society, the quiet support he gave her during her own career's trials, the exuberant pride he showed at her charitable endeavors, into that letter, her tears blotting the ink until it resembled a love letter written across the page. When the morning of the vote arrived, Donna, dressed in simple black and carrying Eric's scarf folded like a banner of defiance, entered the boardroom flanked by Ridge, Brooke, Steffi, Hope, Thomas, and RJ, a united front forged from the shards of tragedy. Across the table sat Zoe and Paris Buckingham, their gilded smiles fading as Donna placed her letter before the board secretary, her gaze sweeping the room with a steely intensity that reminded everyone of the fire that had defined Eric's own negotiations. The chairman called the meeting to order, and the votes were cast, One by one, share proxies were delivered, each click of the ballot echoing like a tolling bell. When the final proxy landed on the table, the chairman's gaveling mallet hovered in midair as he announced the result. The board, influenced by Donna's heartfelt plea, had voted overwhelmingly to reject the Buckingham takeover bid, to honor Eric's legacy by keeping Forrester Creations firmly in family hands. A stunned silence enveloped the room before it exploded into jubilant relief. Ridge embraced Donna, Brooke wept openly, and Thomas and RJ shared a look of triumph that spoke volumes more than words ever could. Zoe and Paris, their gamble dashed, slipped from the room under curt farewells, their ambition thwarted, for now, by a widow's love and a family's resolve. As the board adjourned and the Forrester clan gathered beneath the restored banners of their crest, Donna stood at the window overlooking the gardens, a single tear trailing down her cheek even as she smiled through the sorrow. She draped Eric's silk scarf around her shoulders and whispered into the Tuscan breeze, "We did it, my love. Your legacy lives on." And somewhere, perhaps beyond the veil of mortality, Eric Forrester smiled too, knowing that the empire he built from thread and passion, from love and loyalty, had survived the greatest storm of all, the loss of its heart.